Good morning. My name is David Bruno, Associate Dean of Educational Programming and External Relations at Camden County College. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Gordon Bocher. Today is March 13th, 2025. We are currently located at the William G. Rohr Center at Camden County College here in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. This interview is being conducted for the Library of Congress Veterans History Project in conjunction with the Camden County Veteran Affairs Office. In the room today, there are three other individuals. The first is Lee Waldron, who is a building manager here at Camden County College. We also have Bernie Epworth from the Camden County Veterans Affairs Office. And we also have Sean Dwyer, Esports Director from Camden County College. Good morning, Gordon. How are you?
I am fine, sir.
Good. Can you please just state your name for the record?
My name is Gordon Leslie Bocher.
Fantastic. Gordon, can you just tell me the branch of service and your the rank when you left?
United States Air Force, and when I left completely, Major.
So I'm going to go through some biographical questions just to get everything on record. So if you could just tell me where you were born.
Brooklyn, New York, August 4th, 1942.
Fantastic. And can you just tell me about your parents a little bit, what their names were?
Meyer and Lillian Bocher.
Okay.
I have to have a picture of them when I was 1 year old.
Sure, please feel free to share. And while you're getting that picture, can I ask, did they have any occupations?
My father was a manufacturer, and Mom was a housewife.
Okay. What was he a manufacturer of?
Sundew orange drink.
Okay.
A very popular drink in New York.
Gotcha. I never had it.
If you went to Coney Island, you would.
Did you have any brothers or sisters?
I have a brother and a sister. I'm the oldest.
Gotcha. Are they both still currently alive? Or
My brother passed about 3 years ago.
Okay.
And my sister lives in Florida.
Gotcha. And what were their names?
Marshall and Joanne.
Gotcha. Did any of your brothers or sister, your brother or sister, serve in the military?
Yes, my brother did. He was drafted into the Army. My brother had absolutely flat feet, horribly flat, but they put him in the infantry.
Okay.
And finally, the Army recognized his mistake and they moved him to the food service. But he spent about 4 or 5 months in Vietnam.
Gotcha. What was his experience like?
His experience?
Vietnam? Yeah.
Terrible.
Okay.
He had a full scholarship to Cordon Bleu in Paris. My brother was a great chef. And that service between the Agent Orange and the smoking killed his ability to become a great chef.
Gotcha. What were your parents' feelings about you joining, or even your brother joining the service?
Totally against it.
Okay.
My father was always a patriot, so was my mother, but they felt that the war was wrong. Mom, when my brother got drafted and he had that horrible feat, she went to our senator, I can't remember his name, Jacob Javits. And it took him 4 or 5 months to get the Army recognize his mistake. He put some pressure on him. And when I joined, I left a PhD program in Ohio State. I was a graduate student. And in 1966, when the war started really getting heavy, I felt really guilty about having a 2S deferment while guys my age, including my brother, were over there fighting. And so I told the draft board what they could do with the 2S deferment, which I won't say here because we're not use bad language. And I applied for the officer training school in the United States Air Force. And I got my acceptance to go to Lackland Air Force Base, Randolph, to go undergo officer training about 1 month before my draft notice came in. At that point, I was not eligible for the draft because I was a member of the United States Air Force.
Interesting. Um,
My mother was not happy with that
I was going to
decision.
say, did they express a lot of that feelings to you, or did
Oh
they?
yeah,
Okay.
oh yeah. But they also knew, to their credit, that it was my life to lead,
hmm
and and they weren't happy with the decision, but they accepted it.
hmm How did they feel while you were in the service? Again, did those feelings change at all, or did they become a little bit more understanding of the
Oh yeah,
situation?
I remember that they came when I got my commission. I graduated in the top 10% of my class, and they came down to Randolph, and they were really proud of me.
hmm
In fact, there's a funny story about my parents. Um, you never know what your parents are really like, as adults, because
hmm
you're a kid. And the day before we got our gold bars, Dad invited my element, was 14-man element, myself included, to a meal at the officers club. 7 on one side, 7 on the other. Dad on one head and Mom on the other. And then I watched my mother, God bless her, as she dominated the conversation. Those guys were enraptured with her. And I realized, well, whoa, that's Mom. Who knew?
that is a great story. Let me take a step back and talk about your school um, time. Do you want to talk about elementary or high school where you went?
I went to school, started in Brooklyn. We moved out to the island. I graduated Syosset High School in 1960. I played 4 years varsity soccer.
hmm
Um,
What position?
I was a midfielder,
Okay.
a really good one.
Mhm.
In fact, I had offers to go to, can't remember the name anymore, to, to play for them,
hmm
but it was an all-boys school. I said, I wanted girls. None of that old-boy stuff for me. But all right, uh, I went to Marietta College because they were highly rated in the sciences
hmm
at that, and graduated in 1964 and applied to Ohio State, where I was for the next couple of years trying to get my PhD program. I was a dissertation short of my PhD,
hmm
and
What was your field of study?
economics.
Okay.
And I gave that up to join the United States Air Force.
hmm
The feeling of not doing what I'm supposed to do was overwhelming to me.
hmm
Now, I don't speak for anybody else. This is just me speaking. So I joined, and my first duty assignment, I got accepted into the pilot program. Excuse me. But I wasn't a very good pilot. I did manage to solo a jet, but my air work wasn't great.
hmm
So rather being a mediocre pilot, they sent me off to navigator school. And I got to tell you, the Air Force was right. I would have been a mediocre pilot. I am a great navigator.
hmm
Every squadron I was in, if you ask the guys I flew with, I was the best navigator in that squadron, hands down,
hmm
no low contendere. That's not bragging, that's a statement of fact. All right, I graduated nav school in September 1969, and my first duty assignment was the AC-119 gunship, the Shadow. And I got qualified in that, but in my training in survival school, I had an accident. I had to see the flight surgeon. By the way, when you're rated, you go to you don't wait. You see the first doctor, period. There's no
hmm
waiting when you have wings. So I went in, saw the flight surgeon. He noticed a goiter in my neck.
Okay.
And he says, you have to have that looked at before you go overseas. And he made me promise as an officer that I would do so, which I did. I saw the doctor. My last duty station was in Columbus, Ohio, Lockbourne, if I remember correctly. And the doc looked at it and said, you got to go down to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. They will take a look at it and they'll make a determination. So I took my check ride in the 119 Shadow on December 19th, and I completed it at like 3 o'clock in the morning because you only fly at night, those puppies. And I drove down to Wright-Patterson, saw Dr. Fred Coyle, Colonel, and he took one look at it. He says, you're on my operation thing tomorrow. That thing is, I'm going to take some of it out, and we're going to see if it's cancerous. They took it out on a Friday, and Sunday, the report came back from Columbus that it was both follicular and medullary cancer.
Okay.
He says, okay, that's got to come out. Well, not only all your thyroid, but as you can see my neck over here, they call it a radical neck.
Okay.
My left side used to be bigger than my right side because I'm left-handed.
Okay.
They took it all out.
Mm-hmm.
And the colonel told me at that time, he says, you're not flying anymore. You're grounded. You have to take pills for the rest of your life because you have no thyroid.
Mm-hmm.
And I was devastated.
Yeah, I was going to say, how did that make you feel?
Devastated. Mm-hmm. I enjoyed navigating.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to serve my country.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked the shadow airplane because it protected the guys on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So I got orders. I was given 100% disability.
Mm-hmm.
And I went back to Long Island where my family lived. And I had to decide what the hell to do with my life.
Yeah.
The first thing I did was I had to regain my strength. So I worked on my father's plant as a loader, as a work in the factory, hard physical work. And the foreman named Ike was a Marine, and he worked me pretty good. He didn't care if I was the boss's son. And I built my strength back up. The second thing I did was I went back to school because my math wasn't as good as it should have been. And I signed up at Long Island University to take 2 courses of calculus and 2 courses integral over the next year.
Okay.
2 courses in the summer and then fall and summer. And I broke all 4 curves. The first 2 weeks was a bear and a half. And then all of a sudden it just clicked. And I found out later from another doctor, what happened was before the operation, I was not getting enough thyroid.
Okay.
When they gave me thyroxine, I was getting the proper amount, and all of a sudden my IQ jumped 20 or 30 points.
Wow, that's interesting.
Overnight. It just became really easy for me. And the third thing I did, I decided I wanted to teach, and I taught math. And what I did was I was 7th and 8th grade math, and I took the set theory from my calculus book, and I taught those kids graduate set theory over the whole course of a year.
Wow.
On the theory that if you understand what numbers are, the property of numbers, you'll handle math better. That came out to help me later on. All 3 things helped me. Anyway, so I'm teaching, and also I'm playing racquetball like crazy, getting back in shape. And my roommate from NAV school wrote me. He says, Box, I heard, he was in Germany flying 130s. And he said, I heard a rumor that if you can pass a class 2 physical as a cancer patient, they'll take you back in. Feeling pretty good. And I feel like I haven't done what I'm supposed to do. So I called Randolph Air Force Base, where the chief flight surgeon of the United States Air Force is. And when I told him, the sergeant, what I had in mind, he put me right on line with a full colonel.
Wow.
Do not pass go, do not collect $200. So I talked to the colonel, and I told him that I want to get back in. He sent me a parcel full of paperwork. There's another word I was going to use, but I can't remember that. A whole bunch of it, right? It took me 3 or 4 hours to fill out all this stuff.
I'm sure it did, yeah.
And I sent it back to him. A couple months go by, and the colonel calls me up. This is now April, maybe May. He says, you're okay for this program. What do you want to fly? I said, I want to fly the AC-130 gunship. Silence. He says, wait a minute, that's combat. I know. He says, you take pills for the rest of your life. We can't send you into combat because you take pills. I said, Colonel, either I'm a fully rated navigator or I'm not. I'm not going to take a cush position from another navigator because I don't fly combat. That ain't happening. Either that's your choice. If you want me back, that's what I'm flying. He said, well, that's way past my pay grade. So this is what, beginning of May.
I was going to say, before you go on, how much time went? So when you went in
18
NASCO,
months.
I was going to say that was an
18 months between
Okay.
I left April 7th, 1970, and they when the orders came, which I'll talk about in just a second, it brought me back into the Air Force on 10 November 1971.
Gotcha. And you were working. You said you were working that
Well,
entire
I
time.
got a job teaching. You know, I'm working, and my last conversation with the colonel was, I'm going to Paris. I'm going to be spending my summer there. I have a room at the Cité Universitaire. I'm going to Sorbonne, and I'm going to take a course in French, and I'm going to enjoy Paris. He says, if you need me, if you really want me, just send the orders to American Express. Let my parents know, and they'll notify me through the American Express office. He thought that was cool. He said, you probably won't hear from me until sometime this summer anyhow. So the end of May comes. My courses are over with. My kids all did, except for about half, maybe. I had 90 some odd kids, and all but 4 or 5 of them did 9th grade or higher.
Okay.
Because they knew set theory. So I go off to Paris, and without going into details, I will tell you, I had the best summer any man has ever had in the entire history of mankind. You could not do a better summer than I had.
That's great.
So
but we'll fast forward out of that one.
Oh yeah. That's definitely X-rated. Anyway, so I'm I go to the American Express office, and there's a note from Mom. Orders are waiting in the American Embassy. So I go to the American Embassy, and there's a Marine Guard up there. And for the first time in like 15 months, I return a salute. Because he didn't believe I was an officer. I had to show him my green card.
That's great.
I didn't look like an officer. The orders were there, and they said, you're taking a physical September 1971.
Gotcha. How did you feel, though? Before you talk a little bit about, I guess, do you remember your feelings going to the embassy at that point? Like,
Nervous.
Nervous?
Yeah, I felt incomplete as a man. I needed this. I can't. It's emotional. It's not intellectual. It's emotional. So I get to the embassy. The orders are there. I arrange my trip home. Passed the Class 2 physical with flying colors, and then I get these orders, and I have a copy of them there.
Okay.
The orders were written. I'm a first lieutenant. The orders were written by the direction of the President of the United States. That's how high it had to go up.
Wow.
And the guy that signed the orders was General Ryan, Chief of Staff, United States Air Force, 4 stars. How many first lieutenants ever have orders written at the direction of the President and signed by the Chief of Staff?
Yeah.
All right, so I go back in the service, and I tell my parents I'm flying a 130. I don't tell them about the 8 part of the 130. They're worried enough. So the orders read that I'm supposed to be a sensor operator.
Okay.
And I get to, my first duty station was Lowry Air Force Base. And they tell me, well, I tell them I want to be a fire control officer. And I was elevated to captain. The President promoted me. He can do that, you know.
Yeah. I heard they had that power.
Yeah. So the Captain Bocher says, you're a slick wing navigator. You get no experience. You can't be a fire control officer. I said, let me take the test for both, infrared and fire control. So I said, okay, have at it. No harm, no foul. So I passed both with flying colors. My next duty station is Eglin Air Force Base where do flight training. Same problem. You're a slick wing captain. You got to be a sensor operator. No, I want to be a fire control officer. Let me do both. So I'm the only guy on a 14-man training crew. I'm the only man that takes 2 check rides. I take one as an infrared operator and one as a fire control officer. What I didn't know at the time, and I found out about a year later, all those training reports, every single day, were being flown 12,000 miles from Eglin Air Force Base to Ubon Ratchathani, Thailand,
Okay.
where the 16th Special Operations Squadron was performing combat duties. And the guy reading those training reports was Major Conrad Story, who looked at this. He had a lieutenant colonel, fire control officer, and the guy wasn't worth one piss. Fire control is like being a franchise quarterback on an NFL football team. There are very few franchise quarterbacks. You have an analog computer, which means you can do a lot of computations in your head. You control the order of battle, and you control what goes on in the booth. You control a 14-man crew in the offensive mode, and they don't like junior officers doing that, especially when every one of your other officers, 7 enlisted, 7 officers, and the other 6 officers on my crew all outranked me. But in the offensive mode, I directed that entire plane.
Interesting.
And Conrad looks at this training report and he says, Bocher, mine, walks up to Colonel Tomasini, the ops officer, says, Bocher, put him on crew number 1. I'm 12,000 miles away. I had no idea this was going on. I got to Ubon after survival training in the Philippines. Get to Ubon, and my 7th ride was the first ride with my crew. That was my check ride. And we immediately killed 4 trucks in the offshore, and then dropped down to two corps to protect a Marine outpost. And Conrad loved my ability not only to aim the weapon system, to control the booth, and to direct fire. I make quick decisions. I make good, quick decisions.
Interesting.
Next day, I'm flying with my crew, and Conrad looks at, he's big, he's 6'5", Alabama accent, slow speeches. And he looks at 3 senior majors in my booth beside myself, slick wing captain. He said, the only voice I want to hear out of the booth is Boxers. Boxers, that was it. Yeah. Matter of fact,
You have a picture?
I have. I would like to show you. This is Conrad's story.
Okay.
See it okay?
Yeah.
And the reason he's sitting right seat because he was flight examiner pilot. So he did a lot of guys. He checked out a lot of guys and gave instruction. He was the best pilot you'll ever want to see. And this is crew number 1. And I promise you, if this is the last crew the North Vietnamese wanted hunting them.
I bet.
Incredibly gifted crew.
Who are some of the? Do you remember some of the? Some of the names of everybody in there?
That's Conrad.
Do you want to hold it up a little bit so we can see?
And the guy next to him is Dave Gordon, infrared. The big tall dude right over here, that's George Hatfinney. Okay, and that guy over there is Claude Cox. He is the great table navigator.
And where are you at in the picture?
I'm that little guy over here. They used to go. I used to go into the O Club at Ubon, and I would tell the other crews they weren't as good as crew number 1. And they would come in behind me to make sure I got out alive. But they were upset because they knew I was right. When our base came under attack, and they only put out 1 airplane to defend the base, it was my crew they sent up.
Wow.
If you got to send the best, send the best. All right. So I felt very accepted by this crew, and you got the officers. The officers were 6 born agains, and I'm the Jewish guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they called me the rabbi of the booth.
Mm-hmm.
And it was dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
It was scary as hell, but I felt really, really comfortable with my crew. I mean, I can't. There aren't even words for it.
Yeah.
And it's being part of that crew
Mm-hmm.
was maybe the best thing that ever happened in my life.
Gotcha.
It changed me completely.
Did you think about the time when you were told you can't serve, or when you had the surgery? Did did those thoughts ever come back to your mind? While all these activities were going on.
You mean?
Like, did you think about again
No, I never felt guilty about any of it.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Yeah.
again, it's just a fascinating story that you're given almost that diagnosis. You had the surgery, you stepped away, and then you come back and again, really leading this crew. It really is.
It is. I was destined to do this.
Mhm.
In my tour there, we stopped the second Tet Offensive,
Mhm.
cold in its tracks. The enemy used ambush tactics. Ambush tactics do not work with a C-130 gunship.
Mhm.
We could see through the jungle. My average circular error was less than 12 feet. If there's more than 15, 20 feet separation, I'm giving you cover firepower.
Mhm.
And so ambush doesn't work anymore. And they found that out at Anlock.
Mhm.
Make a long story short, on April 29th, we had two 130s operating that night. The winds were hellacious, in excess of 70 knots, because it was the monsoon season.
Yeah. Mhm.
And probably the only A model pilot who can get into geometry in those conditions was Conrad Story.
Mhm.
And they had a pincer at Anlock. Anlock was the focus of the second Tet Offensive, or the Spring Offensive. They were going to take that city over and declare it the capital of the People's Republic of South Vietnam.
Wow.
And so you had 24 T-54 battle tanks coming south from Cambodia, joining up with a battalion coming up from the south
Mhm.
through the rice paddies. And they were going to meet at Anlock. Well, we caught the southern end when they were across the street from one, what do you call a squadron for the Army? The company. One company of South Vietnam Rangers led by a U.S. Army Ranger. Tunnel 10 Alpha was his call sign. And we caught him. We caught him cold.
Mhm.
And at the very same time, coming from Cambodia down Route 7 were 24 T-54 Russian battle tanks.
Wow.
And an H model, the brand new H model, just freshly minted, brand new to the battle, with his digital computer and 105 millimeter cannon. He takes 25 shots, takes out 24 T-54 battle tanks,
Mhm.
and we, at the same time, take out an entire company. They estimate the loss of the North Vietnamese lost between 800 and 1,200 men in the same 8-minute sequence. Exactly the same 8 minutes. It was one of those weird coincidences in warfare.
Mhm.
And I can tell you, after that date, they never came into South Vietnam in force again. Never.
Hmm.
They could not operate in a gunship environment. That was very proud of my quote. Conrad Winchestered a 130, 8 minutes.
Hmm.
You know how much ammo a 130 carries? It weighs 125,000 pounds, and it carries a whole bunch.
Mhm.
8 minutes. He fired. The only thing we had left to fire were the bullets in our Smith & Wesson 30.
Wow.
We nearly went back to
Mhm.
Tan Son Nhut to rearm and refuel.
Mhm.
And by the way, as a side note, when a 130 hit any base in South Vietnam to rearm and refuel, we had top priority because if the enemy knew we were on that ground, you were going to get an attack.
Yeah.
You guaranteed an attack because
Hmm.
that was the one weapon system beside the B-52s that they feared the most.
Wow.
That was that's what people don't know about Vietnam. And that's the amazing, if you keep gunships in that area, there's no way they could take over the South. When President Nixon was impeached, Congress took all the money away that supported the South Vietnamese, the Cambodians that were loyal to Prince Sihanouk, and the Hmong tribesmen, because we armed them too.
Yeah.
And then they also defunded all operations in Laos, in Thailand, including the gunships. The last gunship left December 15th, 1974. Saigon fell 4 months later. And I promise you, if you have gunships operating, South Vietnam does not fall. That's okay. As far as my service is concerned, that ended that spring offense was over in September. In April. The next thing that happened that you'll be interested in is on June, beginning of June, or the end of May. My crew went on their sabbatical, their 2 weeks leave, which you get in the middle of your tour. Well, I got there 3 months after they did, so I'm still flying.
Gotcha.
So I'm flying all these different crews. And on June 18th, 1972, I'm flying with Paul Gilbert. I have a picture of him. I want to mention him because he was my hooch mate. By the way, if you want to know what a booth looks like,
it'd be great.
This is a fisheye lens of the booth.
Wow.
And let me see. Whatever, this way. Okay, I got it this way. Okay, good. Okay. Black Crow, infrared, TV, fire control. Wow. And that booth is about 11 by 7. This is my hooch mate, Captain Paul Gilbert. And he was an instructor pilot, one of those quiet, conservative, thoughtful men. And there was 6-room hooch, 12 guys in a hooch. And he was 2 rooms over from me. And I used to walk in, we'd talk, and on his counter was a picture of his fiancée, Ms. Georgiana Burke.
Okay.
And I never met her, but from her picture, very, very pretty woman. All right, so we're flying together. It's the only time I ever flew with Paul. And our duty assignment was truck hunting in the Yorkshire. So it was first frag. So we're out on patrol at a little after 8 o'clock that evening. And we find a truck, we come on, we start our attack. Paul was sitting right seat because he was instructing a new pilot, left seat. And we came under attack by an SA-7 missile.
Wow.
SA-7 or SA-9, I don't know which one. We're not sure which one it was. It was a handheld infrared guided missile. And the IO called brake left, and the new pilot was so used to braking right, he started right and then turned left. And that little extra didn't help to shield the engines from the infrared seeking or the heat seeking missile. We took a hit, number 3 engine. And that's on the right side. And you could hear the hit. The Black Crow and infrared leave the booth, and they go running toward the back of the plane because that is always open. That it's two doors. The top door is open, and the bottom one stays in the closed position, and the IO hangs out the back and sees the stuff coming up.
Gotcha.
So that's what, since it was open, that's where they're going to parachute out of there. Well, unfortunately for them, just as soon as they got inside the booth, Paul dove the aircraft in order to get enough airspeed with fire suppression on number 3, hopefully to put out the fire and then take the airplane and land it somewhere. It didn't work. We were told that the flames, we told this by the F4 escorts, the flames from the burning engine went more than 100 feet past the empennage.
Okay.
And so it was a pretty heavy duty fire. And after a couple thousand feet, Paul realized that it wasn't going to work. So he brings the airplane straight and level. And the last words I heard him speak was, "Abandon ship, abandon ship." So the TV operator and myself, we get out. That was Vic Reed, who retired as a full colonel in the United States Air Force, by the way. Vic and I get out, and we're just get to the 40 millimeter ammo rack when the right wing falls off.
Wow.
The plane is filling up with fuel, and there's burning everywhere. Everything. We wear these Nomex flying suits because they protect you from a lot of heat, and trust me, they work. And when the wing falls off, the plane goes into a flat spin. When you're in a flat spin like this, you are pulling 12 G's. So my 150-pound body now weighs 1,800 pounds.
Wow.
I ain't moving.
Yeah.
And I'm like this against the 40 millimeter rack. Vic is right to my left, and I'm looking around the inside of this plane, and there are the gunners. They're strapped to the wall like I am. So I see these dark images because the Nomex food become very dark with reddish light.
Okay.
Because everything was burning, and then it's almost at the point where I'm pretty sure I'm going to die. There's nothing I can do. The plane's doing this. Can't move. Plane's on fire. It's headed right for the ground. And my last conscious thought before the plane explodes goes back to the Lord of the Rings trilogy. When the ring goes into the fire and Frodo and Samwise walk out to a little mound with a sea of lava all around them, and they're holding hands. And Frodo says to Samwise, "I am glad you're here with me here at the end of all things."
Wow.
Because I'm with these guys,
Yeah.
My crewmate, not my regular crew, but members of my squadron. And that was my last conscious thought, because I said, at least I'm going to meet eternity in the best company any man could ever have.
Wow.
And then all of a sudden, everything was red, then everything went white, and then everything went dark.
Wow.
The F4 escort told us later the plane explodes into 5 pieces, and they spit out 2 navigators. Vic is a navigator like I am, and he and I go out, and I didn't open my parachute. My first conscious thought knew I was falling because it was cool. I had no sense of falling at all. And I'm looking down, I could see from the burning plane, the light from the burning plane, I could see the trees coming at me. So I said, hey, I better pull my D-ring. So I pulled that puppy, and my chute opened less than 5 seconds before I hit the trees.
Wow.
And then I followed my survival information that I got when I went to the Philippines in jungle survival school, and when I did regular survival, they taught you how to do tree penetration. I could tell you it works.
Wow.
It worked, and by the time I settled in, I was about 3 or 4 feet from the ground. I could see it
Mm-hmm.
because of from the light from the burning plane. And I hit the quick release, get on the ground, and now here I am in the offshore, the most dangerous place in South Vietnam, alone. And I followed my survival techniques, what I was taught. First thing I do is hide. And in survival school, you're taught by Negritos, little black guys, but yay big. Don't mess with them in the jungle. You do not want to mess with these guys. They may be little, but they're ferocious. And they're very, very good at what they do. And they said, you go up 2/3 of the hill, and you find a place. Well, the offshore is a valley. So I go up 2/3 my side of the hill, and I'm looking for a place to hide. And one of the things that they teach you is not to make a silhouette. So I find this tree with elevated roots. I dig my little, now I'm glad I weigh 150 pounds. I dig my way in there, and then I start calling on my radio on UHF, and I'm talking to the night owl, who was our escort, and he identifies my position, and then he turns us over to a nail bird, which is an OV-10. He takes over around 10, 11 o'clock that evening, and he stays on until about 3 when a Sandy comes in, because we're supposed to be picked up at 5:30 in the morning.
Okay.
About 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm making my regular radio calls. They know where I am, and I'm making my regular radio calls. And after my 2 o'clock radio call, all of a sudden the jungle gets really quiet. And now I'm nervous, really nervous, because I figured out that the jungle gets quiet when a predator goes walk through the jungle. And I hear the North Vietnamese coming down from the top of the hill. Now, the only parachute they saw was Bill Patterson.
Okay.
The instructor IO, he jumped at 7,000 feet, and he's a trained parachutist. He does. So they saw his parachute. They never saw a victim of mine because it opened so close to the ground. They didn't
Wasn't
see
enough time, yeah.
So and I didn't know this. Vic was maybe 50, 100 meters away from me, and he had a badly sprained or broken ankle, so he couldn't move that much, and they went easily. They came down that hill, and I could hear them, and I whispered into my brick, the radio they give you. I have the earplugs in, and I said, you might as well fire my position because they're all around me. And the nail bird said to me, just stay. Are you well hidden? I said, yes, sir. He said, just stay hidden. I said, okay. And they passed within 10 feet of both sides of me. They never saw me. I had my magnificent 38 combat special on my stomach, and if they put their head out there, I would have blown his head off. But they didn't, and I didn't.
Yeah.
And they went past it, and about 10, 15 minutes after they passed this area, the jungle got noisy again. Who knew that a noisy jungle is your best friend? I didn't know until that night.
Yeah.
So at any rate, 5:30 comes, and they can't pick us up because so much ground fire. The Air Force, to its credit, diverted every F-4 to the offshore, every F-4 in Southeast Asia. And I watched those guys go in and pound the enemy positions. I'm about 800, 900 feet above the ground, above the floor, and I could see the F-4s coming in below my altitude, and their normal peak altitude was 6,000 feet. Not that day.
Wow.
They were coming in tree top high, which meant that they were subject to ground fire, and they were dropping nape all over the place.
Wow.
And finally, about 9 o'clock in the morning, it was safe enough to bring in a Super Jolly, and they pick up Vic first because he had the broken leg, and a PJ had to go down and help him up. And then they come over my position, and they said, go to the clearing. So I go to this little bit of a clearing. I unzip my flight suit, show them a lot of white skin, which is, by the way, what you're supposed to do. That's part of procedure. Zip it back up. They send me this tree penetrator. It's a big steel block. It has these 3 seats on them, and you can pull the seat out, and then you wrap your arms around it,
Mhm.
and then you have a strap that goes over your shoulders, and then you jerk on it 3 times, and they start lifting up through the trees. Well, let me tell you, when they get above the trees, the next thing they do, that chopper goes to 6,000 feet in a New York nanosecond. You think elevators are fast? Man, you have, oh my
I can't
God.
even imagine.
I,
Wow.
I didn't, well, first of all, they were overpowered.
Hmm.
They're the most powerful helicopter maybe ever built. And man, can they climb. And I didn't realize, but I'm holding on for dear life.
Hmm.
Well, they get you up to 6,000 feet above small arms fire. That's
Yeah,
why they do
of
that.
course.
And then the PJ pushes you out away from the airplane. It's on the right side because the aircraft commander on helicopter sits right seat. He pushes you out to the right, and as you swing back toward the entrance, he releases the brake on that thing that's holding you, the cable that's holding you up. Little bouncing ball of the navigator. Boom, boom, boom. I think I made 3 bounces into them. I'm still holding on to this thing. And procedure is you don't do anything until you get 3 taps on the, and now you can stand up. You can release yourself.
Yeah.
So I get out of the tree penetrator, and I stand up, and for the first time and only time in my life, I kissed a man.
Hmm.
I kissed the PJ on the cheek. And by the way, I flew rescue about 4 or 5 years later. I met that PJ, and I asked him if I was the only one that ever did that. He said, no, about half the guys do that. So I felt better. So they take us to Denang. They picked up Vic because he was the last one. And they take the 3 survivors out of 15-man crew.
Hmm.
They take us to Denang, and the general officer. Oh, first of all, let me just say one other thing. It took them about an hour and a half to get me clean and get the insects out of my groin and armpit area.
Yeah, I imagine.
Yeah, I had to be cleaned up pretty good.
Hmm.
And they put you in PJs. They put all your other stuff in a bag that you carry, including Smith & Wesson 38 Special. Don't want to forget that. And they fly off to Ubon. I have a picture of something I want to. This is when we got back.
Wow.
On June 19th, this is June 19th, 1972. And that's me.
Hmm.
And I hope you get the sense of family.
Yeah.
The whole squad was out there to meet us.
Hmm.
And I have to tell you about a faux pas I committed. I get off the airplane, the general's airplane, because he gave us an airplane to get us back. I didn't salute my wing commander. I didn't get written up for it, but
Hmm.
Okay, the other thing is I want to show you a picture of Paul. This is Paul Gilbert.
Yeah.
And one other thing that I will. Did you have a good picture of it?
Yep. Hmm.
Okay, good. And just one quick thing, just to let you know what Paul was like. In a letter, it took me 4 or 5 months to write to his family. I'd get nightmares like you would not
Understood.
believe.
Hmm.
I finally got one letter off, and they shared it with his fiancee, Georgiana Burke. And she wrote me a beautiful letter, and I want to quote from her in the last paragraph, or next to last paragraph, what she wrote about Paul.
Hmm.
That I love Paul more than I'm capable of expressing cannot be denied. To consider spending the rest of my life without him is sometimes most unendurable. But most of all, the beauty of the things we experienced together and the joy we shared will live forever. I pray that you will also live with the vestige of him in your heart, as I know the love Paul possessed for his friends and associates was great. Thank you again for your most kind and thoughtful letter. We will always remember your graciousness. I remain Georgiana Burke.
Wow.
So that tells you a lot about him. And I want to show you one other picture. And the reason I show you this picture
Hmm.
It's not because of me. I'm drinking the champagne. But you see this guy over
You're
here?
going to hold it up a little bit more.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Ernie Dickens.
Yep.
First Lieutenant Ernie Dickens was killed on September 20 in September of 1972
Mm-hmm.
aboard Spectre 17, and that's a tragic story in itself. Just horrible circumstances. But Ernie and I, during that Tet Offensive, I had to fly with a lot of different crews because there were so few Focos, and the H models were being refit. They weren't available for combat for the first 3 weeks of that. So I'm flying in April of 1972. I think I flew maybe 70 or 80 combat sorties. I was exhausted beyond. I don't know the word for it. And I flew a lot of missions with him, with Ernie. And later on, when I got back home and I saw American Graffiti, they show you what happens to the guys at the end. And the guy that looks like Ernie was killed at Anlark.
Wow.
And I was there with a lady who knew us from Ubon. I knew her. She was a former wife of one of the guys that was over there, one of my squadron mates. And thank God she was there. I started bawling like a baby.
I can only imagine.
I wasn't expecting it.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about the California. So that was June 19, 1972. I went on to become an instructor and then the flight examiner at the fire control position. And that math I told you about, I redesigned during that second Tet offensive when I'm flying all those different. I did the math because the planes were bent. An A model can take in excess of 7 Gs. It's the only cargo plane that can do that. And our computer counts, aim the weapon system. Remember, it's an analog computer. But we're off the charts. It made it hard for the pilot to fly geometry. So I recalculated the proper gun settings for each airplane I flew. And my average circular went from 30 feet to 12 feet because it was easier for the pilot to fly geometry. And the commander wanted me to teach the rest of the guys. It made me flight examiner, and I did. The next thing that happened was when my crew left. And Conrad, that's when I found out when Conrad told me that, he picked me out when I was still over in Uvon. So it's now November 1972, and I'm sitting, and we're both flight examiners. So I'm in the same office as he is. And he calls me over to his desk. He says, you're getting a new crew, a new pilot, new navigator, the works. He said, make him a crew. That was his last order to me. And almost didn't do it. They did their very best to try and kill me. But I finally got through to them. And when they started listening, they became a damn good, not the crew number one I knew, but at least a good crew. I did make them a good crew. And that was my last order. The Air Force made me a regular officer from that point on. I was no longer a reserve officer. And they asked me, what do I want to do? I said, I want to teach. And they said, okay, you can go over to Maytha. I want to tell you about one thing. I left around the beginning of March, the end of February, beginning of March. I had to spend 3 days at Clark in the Philippines to get my annual physical. Was very complicated because I had cancer. So they did the radioactive stuff, all the things that doctors do. And they also had me address the guys in survival school and tell them what was right, what was wrong, go over my experience, let them share it with them. And I did. And I'm finally on a plane going first to Honolulu, to Hickam Air Force Base. And then I'm going to fly home to San Francisco. Well, I got to Hickam, and this is when you're a Vietnam veteran. I'm a captain, highly decorated. Get off the airplane, looking at my baggage. In order for me to fly combat, the flight surgeon gave me 1,000 thyroid pills. Wow! In a bottle, that's where it went in my flight suit. So I took it home with me. part of my survival school, survival kit. Get it? So the MP or the SP, excuse me, sees this vial of pills. And says, we got a drug runner here. So I spent the next 8-9 hours in the brig until I figure out that it's thyroid pills. It ain't cocaine, it ain't heroin, it ain't all that other crap.
Yeah.
So they said, okay, you're free to go. So by that time, I never got to see much of the island, nothing of the island. Get on an airplane. I go to San Francisco, and I land around 11:30, 12 o'clock at night. And I go immediately, God, I don't want to spend time in Frisco. I want to see my parents. It's been more than a year since I see my parents. They're down in Florida. They're retired. So I call American Airlines, and they had this thing: if you wear your uniform, you're free. And they had a midnight flight going to Miami. So I booked myself on that puppy, and I call my parents, and they're excited. I said, meet me at 9 o'clock in the morning. I'll be at the Miami airport coming in on American whatever. So I get off the airplane, and I'm walking out, and this is what I want people to know, because he asked about Mom. And Miami has that long runway, between where you depart, and where they can meet you at the end of this long hallway, wherever it is. And I'm in my Class A uniform, the blues. And my mother sees me, and she goes running. And she jumps into my arms, and she cried for 10, 15 minutes. Wouldn't let me go. Wow. You have no idea how much you're loved till you run into that. It took my father about 15 minutes to finally work his way in, so he could say hello too. But they never knew I was shot down. I just told them I was flying 130s. Now, when I get back to the factory, I spent a week with the parents, and then I went back to Long Island. My brother picks me up. My brother's running the business now, because I'm Air Force. He's a businessman. That's fine. I had no problem with that. So we get to he has to stop at the plant, and Ike Marine takes one look at my chest and says, "Where the blankety blank have you been?" I said, "Ike, one of those things is Purple Heart. I had 2 DFCs, 8 air medals, and the Purple Heart." I said, "Don't say anything to my parents." They only knew I was flying 130s. I never told them about the AC part. So he kept quiet. And I had I spent a couple of weeks with it, and then I go to Sacramento to teach. Now, a couple of things with this one that is really important as it relates to Vietnam. I got to Sacramento around the first week of April. Finding a place to live, start instructor training school, and I want to go to the synagogue and thank God in His house for survival. Because it was a hairy year, and so I walk into a synagogue, and the only thing I have with a tie and jacket is my uniform, my Class A uniform. So I wear that, and nobody would talk to me.
Wow.
They shunned one of their own because the hatred of this war was so great that they couldn't recognize somebody who felt a little differently. I never walked into a synagogue again until I met and married my wife, Betsy, and she got me back into that. But it was, even when we were training at Lowry Air Force Base, we were not allowed to wear our uniforms downtown. It's just, you don't realize the animosity that the Vietnam combat veteran faced, and what exacerbated his PTS was the fact that he was not accepted by the people who sent him to defend their rights. He comes home, and they treat him so badly. I mean,
Gotcha.
I really believe that's one of the reasons the Vietnam veterans had such a hard time getting back into society.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I became an instructor navigator, and one thing happened there that was really interesting. Uh, they changed the program that I learned. My program that I learned as a basic navigator was a very good program. You know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. They fixed it. So they decided that people didn't need to know theory. But I know from my experience with teaching those 7th and 8th graders, you need to know theory. So I got this new program, um, and I have to teach these guys to become celestial navigators. Celestial is separates the men from the boys in navigation. That's where 25% of the guys wash out. I said, okay, the only way these guys are ever going to be good celestial navigators is to understand the theory behind it. Just like math, you know the properties of numbers, you will do well with math. So I go in there and I start teaching, and I take one look at the syllabus they gave me. And, how can I say? I canned it. Okay. You understand, right?
Yep.
So I wrote my own, and I said, well, I don't have enough time. In the time they give me, I says, radar always ends on a Friday. The radar exam is always on a Friday. The written exam is on a Friday. You pick up that Monday, you start celestial. Well, when I picked up a class, I would go to that radar class on a Friday, before they take the test. And I says, I would order them into a room in the main instructor hall at Mesa. I'd have it all set up. I said, you'll come in that room, you'll be there for 8 hours, and you'll get celestial theory up your evening. And by the way, before you go, kiss your wives and your girlfriends goodbye, because when you get done with me for the next 6 or 7 weeks, you ain't gonna have time for them. I'll give you so much homework, you ain't gonna see them. And they bitch and moan and blah, blah, blah. They come in Saturday, they get the 8 hours, and when they started figuring out that they all were going to wind up in the top of their class, because there are 3 sections, so there's like 60 guys, right? 60 guys. Well, if all of my guys passed, a lot of those guys didn't, and my guys had their top choices of airplanes, because how you wind up. Okay. So I had no problem with that. Once they understood what I was doing, they were all for it. Well, 3 years go by, and I'm doing what I do, and it's my last class. I'm there, and we're doing latitude by Polaris, a 2-hour block, which, because they knew theory, I could teach in 1 hour with my eyes closed. And then you either start their homework. I give a lot of homework. And before the class starts, in walks a full colonel, 06, navigator. I pop the class to attention. He says, seats, everyone sits. He says, carry on, Captain Bocher. And I carry on. And I don't teach the syllabus, I teach my syllabus. Because I'm not going to hide behind it. It's form a line as far as I'm concerned. And 2 hours go by. The last hour, they were just doing the amazing amount of homework I'm assigning. And they were all doing it right. And dismissed the class. Now I'm getting my evaluation. He says, Captain Bocher, it's the finest presentation I've ever seen. He says, your guys are unbelievable. He says, and then he gave me my evaluation, which was straight, it was firewall all to the right. Excellent, outstanding, walks on water. Okay. He says, you know why I'm here? I said, no, sir. Because 06s do not monitor classes.
I would imagine.
Promise.
Yeah.
I promise you. Any ask anybody, 06s do not do that. He said, I'm here because 70% of our graduates are failing their initial check ride in their gaining command. He said, all of yours passed. If we take yours out, it's 88% failure rate. He says, I had to find out what you're doing. And I remember, when I started the class, and he just told me, look at that syllabus and just threw it out because I ain't following that syllabus. And she said, can I take a look at your book? I had all the lesson plans in there.
Mm-hmm.
He says, this is nothing like, I said, yes, sir. He says, you know, you're not following orders. I says, yes, sir. He says, why? I said, well, first of all, I'm a fire control officer on an AC-130 gunship. And if you think orders are going to deter me from doing the mission, you're crazy.
Mm-hmm.
We don't do that in Tactical Air Force. Tactical mission is everything. And those kids are the mission. I was not going to send them out there not able to be navigated. When they left my classroom, they were able to navigate.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, he added 2 days to the syllabus. He could do that. He reported directly to the 3-star general who commanded Air Training Command.
Wow.
That's, then he goes to my wing commander and he says, Bocher, off the schedule for the next 5 or 6 weeks. He's going to rewrite the syllabus for day and night celestial, including all training aids and all exams. Wow. Yes, sir. Huh. And the wing commander did not like me because I was brash, and I was in his face. And when I thought, it wasn't right, it wasn't right. Yeah, I never played the game. Mm-hmm. I found out 12 years in the Air Force, there are 2 kinds of soldiers, airmen, whatever you want to call them, sailors, any. You had your foot soldiers and your combat soldiers, and they're different breeds. And the problem with peacetime is you build up the foot soldiers, and the combat soldiers get. But
understood.
Mm-hmm. When the time comes for the shooting, those are the guys you want. Mm-hmm. I'm the guy you want when the chips are down. Yeah. If you want bureaucracy, I'm not your guy. Mm-hmm. All right. I don't follow. I follow orders mostly, but I will not let orders deter me from doing a mission. So, I rewrote the thing. To my knowledge, they're still using it. Wow. I have one picture. I think you're going to really appreciate when the guys got close to graduating.
Which one? Yeah, I could see. Yeah. Which one's you?
I'm the little guy being held up.
Oh, gotcha.
They love me. Mm-hmm. This group right here, when the incoming class that replaced them started badmouth me at a squadron party, it broke into a fist fight. They would not tolerate it. The guy holding me up is John Weiss. He was the class commander. He was the highest ranking student. And I can tell you, his wife made great Boston clam chowder. He graduated. That's my favorite class right there. All right. So 1976 is rolling around, and my best friend is a very successful lawyer. And he says, look, he says, Box, if you get out of the Air Force, get into law school, I'll get you a really good position on Long Island in New York, in my firm. And you'll be on a path to partnership post haste suite. I says, fine. So I take the law boards. I get in the top 10% of the country. Never cracked a book for it. Just took it cold. And I got accepted to George School of Law, which is one of the most prestigious law schools on the West Coast. Because that's in Sacramento, too. So, I figured, okay, I don't have to move. I put my paperwork in, and the Air Force said, 90% of the pilots and navigators had the DOSs at that time.
Okay.
And they said, we can't let you out. We have nobody left to fly. So I said, what do you want me to do? We're going to send you over to Kadena Air Base to fly rescue. I said, okay. I was upset because I wanted to become I wanted to become a lawyer. I wanted to join my best friend, but I wasn't allowed to do it. And that was very hard for me to take. When I get over there, I'm made the resource manager for the navigators. And like I said, I'm the best navigator on, in that wing. I'm really good. And I know every phase of navigation because I taught it at Nathan for 4.5 years. I got a mission in the Philippines. It's 6 o'clock at night. We just finished a 4 or 5 hour training, boring holes in the sky, and one of these stupid training things that the Air Force does. And they get the call from Rescue Coordination Center, RCC. Pregnant lady in Bataan, which is 155 nautical miles northeast of Luzon, which is the main island. We got to get a chopper over there to get her because she's pregnant. She has a breech birth.
Mm-hmm.
And they're scared that they're going to lose both the mother and the child. So Colonel Watson, who was my ops officer, knows that I'm the navigator, and he accepts the mission. Now, there are 2 typhoons in the area. It's now 6:30 when we start this mission. It's dark in a well digger's, you know what, tushy. And we go out there. Now, one of the strangest things, we're on final when they activate us for a rescue mission. So our call sign changes from King to Air Force Rescue and the five digits of our aircraft. I was getting ready to write up that radar. That radar was unusable. I can't accept this mission with that kind of radar. I need the radar.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I looked down. When they changed our call sign, I looked down. I saw the best radar I had ever seen in over 3,500 hours as a navigator. I mean, it was so sharp, you could paint the crack of a mosquito's tush from 30 miles. It was unbelievably acute. So I accept the mission. And off we go. Get to the island about 8:30. The chopper, it has to be a chopper because there's no landing fields on Bataan. Mm-hmm. They go on the soccer field, load the lady on. They throw her husband on because she thinks this thing is going to eat her. Mm-hmm. Helicopters, 44,500 pounds of helicopter, mm-hmm. in a little helicopter. And they take off. And they're flying my altitude, my air, and my headings. And we get airborne. I tell them to climb to 4,500 feet. We'll go up at 6, and we'll head out to Luzon. Well, a couple minutes later, they said, we can't go above 1,800 feet. Why can't you go above 1,800 feet? She starts bleeding from the vagina.
No. Mm-hmm.
As you go up, the pressure diminishes. It ain't good. So I told her, stay at 1,800 feet. And we're halfway between Bataan and Luzon. I said, the chopper said, by the way, we need fuel. So I had to do an IFR, that's Instrument Flight Rules, IFR refueling. Now, Air Force Reg 60-16, which is the Bible in the Air Force, the Bible, says you need 1 mile in trail in order to complete. And this is when you go around, come around, and hit the drone. You're up over here, the chopper's over there. You go below the chopper, you go underneath the chopper, and then he comes down, hits the drogue, refuels. Mm-hmm. Okay. So we have, on our crew, we have wing standardization. They know 60-16 like the back of their hands. We all know that it's our Bible. Come around, and I'm using this beautiful radar, and I'm calling out the distances. Randy Dill's my pilot. I called 1 mile in trail, no joy. He couldn't even see out of the airplane hardly. It was really bad weather. It was rain, clouds everywhere. And I call a half mile and trail, no joy. Quarter mile and trail, no joy. And I call out, as I call a quarter mile and trail, and we're violation of 60-16 right now. And Randy looks over at his back, just like this, because I'm over here. He's looking back. He says, Box, are you sure you got it? And I won't tell you the exact words, but I tell him, how can I put it? Just fly the blankety blank airplane, and that blankety blank is a gerund. Get the idea. And he's not happy. He's not a happy camper at all. I call out 100 meters and trail, no joy. He picks him up at 50 meters. We're so far outside of 60-60, it's unbelievable.
Wow.
And it's perfect. I mean, I couldn't have put that chopper 1 inch better than it was. He drops down, hits that drogue, 2 lights in the green, fuel starts flowing, he gasses up, we break off, we unhook, reel it in, climb up. He's at 1,800 feet, we go to our 7,500 feet. The whole thing took less than 9 minutes. He sucked up 9,500 pounds of gas, JP4.
Wow.
Now we get to Luzon. I don't have fuel to go around the island and stay over water. I got to go through the island. The minimum safe altitude in Luzon is 6,000 feet. This puppy's at 1,800 feet. He can't even see the light at the end of his pitot tube, or the refueling tube, which is maybe 15, 20 feet from. He can't even see that light. That's how bad the visibility is. All he has, and as we go down Luzon, the Gulf of Lagayan, and as we approach land, I tell Randy, I want to talk directly to the pilot. I don't want to talk through you. And pilots don't like to give up their frequencies. But Randy, didn't take long. He says, okay, Box, you got it. Take Victor 2. So I take Victor 2. I'm on VHF. And now I'm talking directly to these 2 chopper pilots. And believe me, what they want to hear is that Brooklyn voice, that Brooklyn accent. I'm telling them heading, and I tell them, your airspeed's 120. And I'm starting to get ahead. They didn't go 5 minutes without getting a heading correction from me. Down to a half a degree. Normally, when you do a chopper, they like things in 5-degree increments. They were down to a half a degree flying. These things that stand up, I don't know what stellites, what do they call them? You're in the middle of nowhere.
Wow.
I could paint them on the scope. My job was to do this. 45 minutes, longest 45 minutes of my life.
Sure.
And they finally break water. Now they're in the Gulf of Manila. I said, okay, turn over the Manila approach. Go for it, guys. And they said, they don't trust Manila approach. They want me to do an ARA, airborne radar approach. I am the only navigator in that squadron that can do an ARA because I taught it. There's only one command, Strategic Air Command, that demands that their navigators do ARAs. The guys that fly the B-52s, I have to teach it, so I have to know how to do it. So I set this guy up, and make a long story short, I take him in. The minimums for ARAs is 1,000 feet, 2 miles visibility. They landed with 100-foot ceiling and a quarter-mile visibility. Slight violation of Air Force Reg 60-16 again. They hit the ground. They're immediately met by the ambuli. They take the lady, and by the time we get back to Clark, and the chopper joins us, they tell us mother and son are doing well.
Good.
They would survive. And one quick note: one of those pilots in the chopper, he and I used to go head-to-head battles because that's when Carter reduced training time and training for money for training. And he resented the fact that we took time to train our navigators. And I asked him, I said, do you think it was a waste of time anymore? It ended that argument. The other thing that happened when I was over there, I did a rescue mission. Long story. I'm not going into all the details, but I did a rescue mission in Iwo Jima. and we had to land there for 7 days. And I walked around that island, and I'm an Air Force navigator. I love my Air Force. I have a ton of respect for the United States Marine Corps.
Mm-hmm.
When you get to the top of Mount Suribachi, and you saw those guys on the eastern shore of Iwo Jima, only guts take that island.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, I think everybody, before they vote, should walk up Suribachi and find out what the cost of freedom is.
Mm-hmm.
I was there in '77, and they were still finding bodies in the crevices, the deep crevices of that island.
Wow.
That, all right, so after I get out of flying with them, and the 33rd was a great squadron, very good squadron. I go to the 55th, which is in Eglin Air Force Base, 55th, and it was horribly run. This is a squadron run by foot soldiers. They wouldn't know combat if it fell on them. In fact, my ops officer in a combat unit, he would have been fragged. He was so inept. He's going to cost lives. I mean, you can't tolerate that. He was completely, and I also think he was an anti-Semite.
Mm-hmm.
He gave me a hard time, a really hard time. So I put my paperwork in. And my last active duty mission, I was sitting alert in February 1980. I'm scheduled to get out in June 1980. So I got maybe 4 months to go. And I'm sitting there on alert with a sweet young thing on a date. And the brick goes off. And that's okay. Come to base ops, bring your cold weather gear, and be there in an hour and a half. And I said, where we go? Can't tell you, it's classified. Okay. So I dropped this sweet young thing off, go to my house, pick up my cold weather gear, flying gear, get to base ops, the commanders, the squadron commanders up there. Where am I going? Can't tell you, it's classified. I'm the navigator. I gotta know these things.
Yeah.
You know, charts and stuff like that. So the guy I'm flying with, the pilot I'm flying with, was also from the Pacific Theater. We're both from the Pacific Theater. We've never flown the Atlantic Theater before. So we get to, finally, around midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, they said, you're going to Keflavik, Iceland. In February, thank you. I said, okay, I'm leaving Florida to go to Keflavik. This is not a vacation.
Yeah.
So this pilot, myself, we're looking around for Atlantic 1. You know, in the Pacific, you have Pacific 1. It gives you all the departure and entry points from North America to South America, and then you go to the other side, the left side, you know, all the ones in Asia. Okay. We can't find Atlantic 1. So the commander walks in, why are you guys flight plan yet? We can't find Atlantic Chart 1. He said, no. In this theater, you use low Canadian 13. Low Canadian 13. Low Canadian 13, there it is. All the point to you from Europe all the way down to Africa, and on the other side, you know, there's the North Atlantic down to the South Atlantic. Oh, okay. Flight plan, away we go. We get to Iceland about, I don't know, 9, 10 o'clock the next morning. Excuse me, next evening. And it's dark, 8 inches of glare ice everywhere except the runway. They meet us at a bus. They take us to this wooden hut. This is your quarters now for the next month. You can't talk to anybody not on your crew.
Wow.
You can't make phone calls. You can't leave the base. You can't even go to you have to stay in this area. Okay. What are we doing? You're sitting alert. Okay. We sit alert for a month. And we do 2 missions that month, looking for lost boats. You know, fishing boats. Finally, they say, okay, now you're going to, I forget the name of the base, it's in Eastern England. And you're going to sit alert there. Okay, we get it much better. Food is much better. Accommodations are much better. And I'm going to tell you, the one time I violated the drink, we're sitting alert because you're on constant alert. And I went to the O Club, the officers club, and I had a beer with my meal. Because in England, that's what they do. They don't consider that drinking. Well, when in Rome, right? Okay, we sit there for another month. And then they say, okay, we want just the pilot and the navigator. And they bring us in this room and say, you're going to Eastern Turkey. And they gave us a set of coordinates. I got a flight plan, this puppy. Now, this is not just a flight plan, you're drawing a line and going like this. You're crossing a gazillion countries. And all of them have different rules. It took us damn near 8 hours to flight plan that puppy.
Wow.
You got to make sure that every altitude, and you have to connotate on your chart, frequencies, charts, and all kinds of good stuff that, it is the most involved flying you'll ever see in your entire life. It took longer to flight plan than it did to fly it. And so next day we get to Eastern Turkey, and there's these packages that are covered by a canvas on the back of our airplane. I have no idea what they are. We land, and they say, you're on crew rest. And while we're on crew rest, this is at night, this is April 24th, 1980, they undo those containers, take off the carb, and what they are is the 3 weapons, actually 6 weapons for 3 per chopper. We have 2 H-53 choppers that we're going to be escorting into Iran for the rescue mission to get our 53 hostages out of the embassy in Tehran, Iran. And we are to sit airplane alert at first break at like 4 o'clock in the morning. As soon as our 12 hours were up, we were on that airplane. And they brought us meals to eat on the airplane. And we sat there. While we were getting our crew rest, the ground crew took those weapons that were in the back of our airplane and put them on the choppers. And the reason they were so covered is that violates Turkish law. In Turkey, they have no sense of humor. You violate their law, you're going to be in prison for a long time. So about 9, 10 o'clock that morning, when they realized the mission was a bust, they say, okay, go to what passed for base ops was some kind of tent. Go ahead and put in a flight plan any way you want. Just get out of Turkey. So I looked, and if you look at where we were in Turkey, and you draw a straight line through the Mediterranean where you're in international waters, you don't have to worry about individual countries and stuff like that. And it took me right to Aviano, Sicily. Not Aviano, I forget the name of the place. Very. So we go to northern, there's an air base there, civilian, but we can land there. And I draw a straight line, get the IKO flight plan in, and we put it in, we get back. Meanwhile, they had taken all the armaments off the choppers, put them back on our airplane, covered them up. And believe me when I tell you, we had first priority getting off that base. As soon as we were ready to go, man, there was no traffic was getting our way of getting out of there. And when I finally cleared Turkish airspace, I was one relieved customer. We land in Salerno, that was it. Salerno, we spend the night there, get our crew rest, and then we book off to the Canary Islands, spent 3 days there on the squadron. That was like a little mini vacation. And now we're going home. Well, the winds they give me going home were terrible. I don't have enough fuel to get there. I mean, we were 3 hours longer than I flight planned because they gave me bad winds. And so we had to declare an emergency and land in Jacksonville. And Jacksonville's here, and Eglant's there. It's just a little, 20 minutes of flying. So we stopped, pick up 10,000 pounds at JP4. And in the meantime, I called that young lady, and I said, you still want to see me? She did. And I want to tell you, we got in, and mission was completed that night. took me 2.5 months, but mission was completed. Now, getting back to this thing, I knew nothing what was going on, not a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Then I get to, I'm getting ready to leave the Air Force. It's around the first week of June, and we get called into a meeting, and General James A. Hill is going to brief our squadron. Have you ever heard of a 4-star general? He's number 2 in the Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
He's Vice Chief of Staff, United States Air Force. 4 stars, right? He's briefing my little squadron. And he told us what happened that night. If you really want to find out, you read my book, Storm Rider, you find out. But at any rate, then I finally figured out what was going on. And a couple of days later, I left, to go back to Long Island and start the civilian life.
Wow. Beyond interesting. That's the only way I can describe it. It's certainly the detail. Gordon, let me just, again, I want to give you a chance just to kind of close it out. And, I guess of all the things that you experienced as a veteran or as an active service member, what do you want the members of our community today to remember or to think about? How can you inspire people to think differently about the military in any way? What is that message that you want people to take away from all of this?
Living a life where you have a defined mission and being with people that are dedicated as you are to complete that mission is an experience I don't know the words for it. It changes you. It is flying with crew number 1 was the absolute highlight of my life. We were 14 men, and we were like one solid mind, one mind with 28 arms and legs. I mean, just doing what they do, and being so dedicated to a mission. I think one mission says it all. It was the middle of the siege at Anlock, around the middle of April, and one of our Army specialists was really under really heavy fire, and it was his call sign was Zippo 11. Still remember the call sign. And the weather was abysmal. It was the middle of the typhoon. I mean, monsoon season. And I had a particularly good inertial nav system. Now, our rules of engagement said in order to fire in a populated area, I had to have visual. Visual meant either infrared or infrared or TV. One or the other had to work. Well, I would pick up the guy's hut maybe every 3rd or 4th orbit, and that's it. I had no definitive anything after that. And I called to my pilot. I said, "Pilot, Foco," and he said, "What do you have in mind, Foco?" I said, "Sir, turn off all the recorders." There were like 6 recorders on that aircraft. We turned them all off. He said, "What do you have in mind, Box?" I said, "Sir, I want to fire off the inertial. It's particularly accurate. We'll get range and bearings from Zippo 11, and we'll fire at the enemy. Maybe he'll come home alive." And Conrad said, "If I don't hear anything for the next 60 seconds, we're going to follow Box's suggestion." Any one of those 14 men could have said, "No, I'm not going to violate the rules." Any one of them, that would have been it. We would have walked away from it. Quiet for 60 seconds.
Wow.
He said, "What do you want?" I said, "I want gun number 3, HE, half mil coincidence, automatic fire." Put the range and bearing in, and for the next 4 hours, we fired into the night. We never saw a single round hit. Everyone hit where it was supposed to. And Zippo 1 would send up the range and bearing. We put that in the computer and lock and load, and daylight came, clouds lifted, and Zippo 11 lived another day. And when I hear the Star Spangled Banner with the bombs bursting in air and the flag was still there, My flag is Zippo 11.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I remember.
Great, great. Well, Gordon, thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you for the detail, the memories that that you wanted to preserve, and most importantly, thank you for your service.
I do it again.